Hello there, my dear sleepy listener. Welcome back to the quiet, to this moment you've carved for yourself where the world can wait and wonder is allowed to rise. Tonight, you and I are not here to chase answers. We are here to drift through them, to feel the hush between questions, to wrap ourselves in moonlight and ask, very gently, does the moon know it's being observed before you drift away into peaceful slumber? Please take a moment to like this video. Leave a gentle comment about your favourite moment of science, and subscribe to keep these bedtime stories coming. And if you'd like, share your location and time zone below. Tell us where in the world you're watching from. Under what slice of sky the moon found you tonight. Now, dim the lights, get cozy, and let your curiosity float alongside the stars. You lie still now, beneath the velvet sky, and far above you there she is, the moon, perfectly round tonight. Or maybe a soft crescent, curved like a sleeping smile, maybe half lit, balanced between shadow and shine. She doesn't announce herself. She never has to. She simply arrives, rising over rooftops and ridgelines, hovering above oceans and alleys, slipping between buildings or riding high above bare fields. You look at her, and for a moment, it feels like she's looking back. But does she notice your gaze? Do celestial bodies register attention? Do they respond not with reaction, but with presence? You feel something stir inside you, something ancient, not fear, not awe exactly, something softer, a sense that you're not alone, not just in your room or your city, but in the universe itself. You feel seen, and not by anyone, by something, by her. And yet, the moon doesn't change when you look at her, or does she? You drift gently into that silver glow, into the soft light that washes over the earth when the sun has gone to sleep. It's not her own light, of course. You know that. The moon is not a lamp, she's a mirror. She borrows sunlight, takes it in without fire or flame, and reflects it back as tenderness. Her surface is cold, hard, dry, but the light she gives us feels warm, emotional, almost maternal. You've felt it on your skin, that eerie stillness, the kind of light that doesn't wake you but somehow reminds you to feel. You float now through your own memories of moonlight, nights walking alone with your thoughts, conversations that felt different under her glow, moments of silence that somehow carried more weight. Has she always been there, watching you grow, keeping time, even when you didn't look up? You drift closer now, rising above rooftops, past clouds, past plains. The moon waits, she always does, suspended at just the right distance, neither too close nor too far. A satellite, yes, but also a companion. She orbits the Earth at about 384,000 kilometers, a number so vast it loses meaning unless you feel it. But more curious than her distance is her gaze, or, more precisely, the fact that it never changes. She shows us only one face, the same side, always turned toward us. Not by choice, but by gravitational rhythm. It's called synchronous rotation. The moon spins just once per orbit, matching her rotation to her revolution, so her far side never sees us. She's locked in a kind of eternal dance, spinning, revolving, but never turning away. And so, you wonder, if she always shows the same face, can she feel when we're watching you hover above her surface now? It is pitted and scarred, each crater a frozen moment, each basin a history of impact. She has no wind, No rain, nothing to erode what has happened. Everything stays. And in that way, the moon remembers, not through consciousness, but through permanence. She is not sentient, but she is aware in the way that mountains are aware, in the way oceans listen, not because they think, because they exist in relationship with us. You wonder if being watched changes the moon, not in matter but in meaning. When you gaze at her, you change. Your breath slows, your thoughts soften. Is it possible that this exchange, though one-sided, is still mutual? You begin to feel the quiet answer rising like a tide. Maybe the moon doesn't need to know she's being observed. Maybe she knows simply by being looked at. Maybe observation is a kind of cosmic acknowledgement, a thread stretched across distance, light bouncing off dust, travelling through space, falling softly into your eye and whispering, "I'm still here," and you, without moving, respond, "So am I." So tonight, as you lie beneath her glow, feel the pause, the hush that happens when the world forgets to hurry, when you remember to look. When the moon, without asking, without needing, meets your gaze with her own silver stillness, and just maybe, in that stillness, she lifts her face a little more toward you. You float now not in silence, but in echoes. Soft rumbles ripple through the fabric of deep time. Not sound as you know it, but vibration, impact, energy. You're moving backward, not just in years, not centuries, not millennia, but eons. 4.5 billion years ago, the Earth was still forming young, molten, unsettled. A world without oceans, without life, without even a moon. The sky above was not dark and calm. It boiled. Rocks rained from space. Heat roared across every inch of surface. And then something happened. Something that changed everything. A collision. You drift now toward it. Not quickly. Not fearfully. Just close enough to feel the scale. A planetary body roughly the size of Mars barreled into Earth. Scientists call it Theia. It didn't just graze. It didn't just kiss. It hit. Hard enough to crack Earth open, to send pieces of crust and molten core spiraling into space. Not dust. Chunks. Ribbons of rock and fire looping into orbit around the wounded Earth. And from this chaos, a circle began to form. Slowly, softly. A disk of debris flattening, gathering, coalescing. You watch as pieces draw toward each other, not by will but by gravity. Small bits become larger. Larger ones pull others in. Until, eventually, the moon is born. Not with ceremony, with silence. A sphere of rock, hot, alive with motion, cooling slowly as it drifts away from Earth in the tender aftermath of impact. You hover between them now, between parent and child, sister and sibling, and you feel the strange ache of separation. The moon is not foreign to Earth. She's a part of it, torn, reshaped, released. She circles still, not as a visitor, but as a memory. The Earth, too, remembers. The tides, the tilt, the rhythms of season and time, all shaped by this orbiting remnant of a long-ago wound. You pass through the Earth's axis and see how the moon's presence stabilizes its spin. Without her, our planet would wobble wildly. Seasons would stutter. Climate would shift unpredictably. The moon holds the Earth steady by simply being there. No push, no pull, just presence. And in that presence, a kind of healing. You drift into a metaphor, a scar that became a star. What once broke the earth now guides its rhythm. You think of your own wounds, the moments that split you, that scattered you, and you wonder what has your orbit become. What once felt like destruction may have shaped your tides, too, may have circled back as light. The moon does not shine as a reminder of hurt. She shines because from chaos she found form. You pass now into the modern debate. Not all scientists agree on this story. There are alternate theories that the moon formed alongside Earth, or was captured later, but the giant impact hypothesis remains the most poetic and the most supported. Samples from the Apollo missions show that the moon's composition is nearly identical to Earth's outer layers, as if they were once one, as if the moon carries our earliest geologic memory. You imagine that. A satellite not just orbiting, but remembering. A silent librarian of Earth's ancient self. You wonder now, did Theia ever know what it had become? Does the universe grieve its collisions or only celebrate the shapes left behind? You glide along the moon's crust, thin, broken, a shell of volcanic basalt and ancient regolith. She is not untouched, she is marked, but she is whole, and she is steady. Even now, she continues to drift. The moon moves away from Earth a few centimeters every year, a quiet farewell spread over millennia. And one day, far in the future, she may no longer hold sway over our tides, but tonight she is here, still circling, still glowing, still ours. You return to the present slowly, gently, back through layers of time, through rings of dust and memory. You lie beneath her once more. You look up, and you feel it again, that presence, that pull, not of gravity, of kinship. She came from us, and though she drifts, she never truly left. You drift now above the sea, not far, just high enough to watch it breathe. The tide is rising, not in waves that crash, but in swells that lean, gently, slowly, as if the ocean were listening to a voice only it can hear. And that voice is the moon. You've heard of tides, of course, but you've never floated this close to them, not from the surface, but from just above, watching water respond to something impossibly distant. It feels like magic, but it is gravity, not the kind that pulls you down, the kind that reaches. From 384,000 kilometers away, the moon pulls at Earth's oceans. She doesn't move them like a broom across a floor. She stretches them. You hover now over the equator, and you see the sea lift subtly into an invisible bulge. Wherever the moon passes overhead, water reaches toward her, and on the opposite side of the earth, strangely, the water lifts too. Two high tides, always dancing with her passage, always turning their faces toward her. Even as the earth spins, the tides move like slow breath in and out, a rhythm older than language, and you realize now this isn't just physics, it's intimacy. The ocean doesn't just respond, it remembers, and in every bay, every inlet, every tide pool left behind on rocky shores, there's evidence of that pull. You drift now into a tide pool at night. Tiny crabs skitter under moonlight. Anemones curl inward. Barnacles hold still, waiting. The creatures here are tuned not to clocks, but to lunar rhythm. Some animals spawn only at certain tides, on certain moonlit nights. Coral reefs release their eggs on precise lunar cycles, as if answering a celestial invitation written in reflected light. You pass through the body of a horseshoe crab, prehistoric and armoured. It climbs onto shore when the tide is just right, when the moon is high. when something old and unquestioned tells it, now you float higher. The moonlight ripples across the water, and you feel the difference between cause and calling. The moon doesn't force the ocean, she asks. And the ocean says yes, and so do the animals, and the sands, and the salt. You feel it now, how even your own body, made mostly of water, might remember her pull. Some researchers suggest our sleep follows subtle lunar patterns. Dreams become vivid near full moons. Sleep is lighter. Restlessness rises. No one knows exactly why. But still, the data hints. The body listens. You think of your own tides, the way your energy rises and falls, the strange days when emotion crests, unexplained, the quiet lows that follow like a gentle receding. You wonder, are you pulled? Too. Maybe not as obviously as the sea, but still. Still. The moon tugs at your waters, maybe not with force, but with memory. You remember now a time you walked along the beach at night, the tide high, the moon above, and something in you softened. You didn't know why. You didn't need to, because you, like the ocean, respond without needing explanation. You simply feel, and that's enough. You drift now into the space between ocean and moon. That invisible thread of force, a whisper of gravity woven through the void. It is not a rope. It is not control. It is relationship. And though the moon pulls the ocean pulls back. Yes, even from Earth, we influence her. The tidal bulge tugs on the moon ever so slightly, slows her orbit, pushes her away, a few centimeters each year. Someday, millions of years from now, the tides will grow weaker as she drifts too far to pull. But tonight, she's here, still listening, still pulling, still held in a relationship older than language, older than breath. You float between them, earth and moon, ocean and sky, and you feel the quiet truth. The moon is not alone in the story. She's not just an object to be looked at. She's a partner in a long, slow conversation. And the sea, every wave, every tide is her response. You drift now through rhythm, not the loud kind, not clapping or marching or ticking, but the soft, almost hidden kind that lives inside bodies and seeds and bones. The kind that follows light even when eyes are closed. The kind that listens to the moon. You move across a reef, and it is dark, not silent, never silent. The sea hums. Creatures shift, but tonight, something extraordinary is about to happen. You hover over coral, those small architects of calcium and colour, and just as the moon reaches a certain fullness, as its silver light glides across the water, the coral begins to release its secrets. Tiny pink spheres rise into the sea like underwater stars, spawning. The coral has no clock, no calendar, no brain, but it knows. Because the moon has whispered, it's time. You watch them drift eggs and sperm, risen like prayer, a synchronized ritual, timed not to the sun, but to lunar rhythm. Science has studied this, marveling at the precision. Even slight shifts in moonlight can delay or confuse the event. It is that delicate, that ancient. You drift away from the reef, into forests now. Night presses in softly, and above the treetops, the moon lingers. You feel movement on the ground. Wolves, silent feet, eyes reflecting. For generations, people have believed that wolves howl at the moon, that they sit in clearings and raise their voices to her face, and maybe they do, not in devotion, but in response. Because moonlight changes the night. It illuminates the terrain, alters prey behavior, shapes timing. Some animals move less when the moon is full exposed by light, others hunt more. You feel that delicate shifting. That way the brightness of the moon doesn't just change the world visually, but biologically. You drift now into the human body, a bedroom, someone sleeping, or trying to. The moon is full, pressing through the window, even behind closed curtains, and something in the body stirs. Heart rate, REM patterns, sleep depth. Several studies have found that sleep grows lighter during the full moon, even in people unaware of the lunar phase. No one knows why. Is it light alone evolutionary vigilance, some forgotten rhythm written into our DNA? No one is sure, but the pattern repeats. You think of your own nights, those where sleep feels slippery, thoughts more vivid, dreams louder, and you wonder, was the moon watching then? Were you listening? You float now into menstruation, a cycle long tied to the moon, roughly 28 days, like hers. For centuries, people have noticed the echo, that women's cycles aligned with lunar ones, that ovulation, bleeding, energy can reflect the shifting sky. Science debates this. Is it myth coincidence, or a biological inheritance from a time when we lived under open skies? Some researchers think the connection may have faded with electric light, urban rhythms, alarm clocks, but the memory remains. You feel it. The gentle suggestion that perhaps your body remembers something your mind forgot. You drift now into rituals, not biology, but belief. People have marked moon phases with ceremony for millennia. New moon intention, full moon release, dances, songs, stillness. Even today, people gather to charge crystals, to bathe under moonlight, to write wishes in notebooks lit by silver glow. Whether or not these rituals shift atoms, they shift attention, and attention, you realize, is power. When we look up, we remember that we are not alone, that we are part of a cycle bigger than productivity, deeper than tasks. You float now into your own memory, a night when you couldn't sleep, the moon high, and you, sitting by the window, watching her. You didn't speak, you didn't expect anything, but you felt less alone, because something was constant, still, beautiful, and indifferent, but not unfeeling. The moon does not answer. She reflects. She does not move toward you, but she pulls. And that pull is not only physical, it is emotional, mythic, molecular. She shapes tides and dreams, and birth and decay. She shapes time, and though we may not always see it, we are shaped too, by shadows that move without touch, by rhythms we don't remember learning, by light that listens without speaking. And so tonight, you rest not just under moonlight, but within it, letting it press against your skin like memory, like lullaby, like something older than sleep itself. You drift now through something that doesn't weigh you down. It lifts. It barely touches your skin, yet it finds every surface. It spills across rooftops, slides over mountaintops, sinks gently into oceans and makes them silver. Moonlight, not the fiery blaze of the sun, not the flickering warmth of fire. This is something else entirely. It is light, but it does not burn. It glows, and you float into it now as though stepping into a whisper. It doesn't belong to the moon. Not really. She is not a star. She has no furnace, no fusion, no flame. The light she gives is borrowed. Each beam you see began at the sun, a storm of hydrogen and helium, a churning crucible where atoms dance and collide and fling energy outward in all directions. Some of that light reaches Earth directly, some takes a detour. It strikes the moon's rocky surface dusty, airless, still, and then it bounces. Not all of it, just a sliver. Only about 12% of sunlight reflects off the moon. The rest is absorbed, lost in shadows and silence. But that 12% is enough to light your face as you stand outside in the dark. You feel it now not with heat, but with stillness. Moonlight feels cooler, though it's made of the same particles. Photons, just travelling a different path, just taking a longer journey. And in that journey, something changes, not the particles, but their meaning. You drift into the soft paradox, the moon has no light of her own, yet she lights the night. You pass through that idea slowly, like mist through trees. You think of moments in your own life when you didn't feel like the source, but you still shone. When someone leaned on your light, even if it wasn't yours. When you reflected kindness you once received. When you softened the world around you just by being there. The moon reminds you of that. She does not generate. She mirrors. She takes brilliance and makes it bearable. You drift closer now to the moon's surface, the regolith, fine as powder, grey as memory. It doesn't shine like glass or water. Its reflection is rough, scattered. That's why moonlight feels diffuse, like it touches everything without blinding anything. It doesn't cast sharp shadows. It rounds them, smudges their edges. You feel that in your mind now. Too, how moonlight doesn't just change the world outside, but the landscape inside. Ideas soften, thoughts slow. The need to know becomes the willingness to wonder. You float now through the visible spectrum. Moonlight, like sunlight, carries all the colours, but at night your eyes shift. The rods in your retina, the photoreceptors tuned to low light, take over from the cones. They see less colour, more contrast. So moonlight feels grey, silver, blue, but that too is illusion. The light contains every hue, it's your eyes that translate it differently. And still, you love it. Because moonlight is not about clarity, it's about gentleness. It makes no demands. It doesn't push through curtains or sting your skin. It waits, patiently. It doesn't arrive loudly. It emerges, and sometimes you don't even notice when it's there, until it's gone. You drift now through shadows. The moon's light is partial, always shifting, crescents, halves, gibbous, full. She never stays the same for long, and yet each version of her feels complete. You think of your own phases, how you shine even when you feel only half lit. How your light changes shape but never disappears. How sometimes your glow is hidden but still rising. Moonlight teaches that, not through words, but through presence. She says, you don't need to burn to be radiant. And you believe her. You drift now through places where moonlight falls silently. Deserts, empty and endless. A fox pauses, her shadow stretches. Mountains, where frost catches the light and makes it sing. Fields, where dew reflects tiny stars back to the sky. And even cities where between buildings and streetlights, the moon still finds her way in. Still shines on windows and sleeping children and lovers walking slowly home. You think of the phrase moonlit path, and you understand now that it's not just illumination, it's companionship. Moonlight walks with you. It doesn't guide like a flashlight. It accompanies. It does not command, it joins. You rise again into the sky, your body weightless in reflection. And you wonder, does the moon know what she gives us? Does she feel the quiet joy of being noticed? Does she sense when someone gazes up, not with questions, but with thanks? You don't need an answer, because like moonlight, gratitude doesn't always have to be spoken. It can simply be felt. And in this moment, as you lie still, silver soft in the dark, you feel lit from somewhere far away by something that isn't even trying to shine. And still you glow. You float now in orbit, not falling, but circling, not rushing, but suspended in a motion so smooth it feels like stillness. You're beside the moon, and she is turning, but slowly, so slowly you almost miss it. She completes one full spin each time she circles the Earth. Not faster, not slower, exactly once per orbit. And so, from here on Earth, we always see the same side, the same familiar face, the bright Maria ancient lava plains, the cratered highlands, the sea of tranquility, the mark that looks like a knowing eye, always turned toward us, always watching, the far side, sometimes called the dark side, isn't actually dark. It receives just as much light, but we never see it, not with our naked eyes. It's locked away in this elegant rhythm called synchronous rotation. You drift into its cause. Long ago, the moon spun faster. She turned freely, as planets and moons do. But Earth pulled at her, not only with gravity, but with a more subtle force tidal friction. Just as she pulls at our oceans, we pull at her mass, and over millions of years, that constant tug slowed her spin until it matched her orbit. A perfect lock. Now, she dances around us, always keeping one side in view, like a dancer frozen in a slow pirouette, always facing her partner, and the other side, it stays hidden. Not out of secrecy, but because of balance. There's something poetic here, something tender. She shows us only half of herself. And yet she reveals so much. You think now of the people you know, the ones you love, how none of them reveal everything, how they each have a side they keep turned inward, shielded by rhythm, protected by time, and yet you love them anyway, not in spite of the hiddenness, but because of it. The mystery makes the presence more beautiful. You drift to the moon's far side now. It is not darker, but it feels more distant. Until 1959, no human had ever seen it. It was the Soviet Lunar 3 probe that sent back the first images. Greyer, rougher, more craters, no large Maria, no face, just geology raw, lunar, silent. You wonder if she minds that we call one side near and the other far, that we think in terms of visibility, as if what we cannot see is less known, less worthy. But the moon, in her slow spiral, teaches otherwise. What stays unseen can still shape the dance. You drift now into the mechanics. Why does the lock remain? Because both Earth and Moon exert gravitational pulls on each other. The moon's mass isn't uniform, there are slight bulges, variations in density. These get caught in Earth's pull, like a key in a groove, locked. And yet, it's not a prison, it's a harmony. The same side always facing us means the moon's pull is consistent. Our tides follow a pattern, our calendars, our stories. You remember old maps of the moon, just one face drawn over and over, and the far side, labelled unknown, was left blank for centuries. Now we've mapped it, photographed it, even landed probes upon it, but still, it feels hidden. As if the moon has a secret she's willing to share, but only if you approach gently, Only if you understand that not all revealing is done with words or even light. Some things remain hidden because they are sacred. You float again beside her, so close. You could reach out and touch the grey, but you don't. You just hover, respectful, and you feel her motion steady, slow. You match her speed. You circle with her, and you begin to understand something. The moon doesn't choose this lock. It is a result of ancient forces, long, slow shaping, just like you. There are parts of you you never chose to hide. They simply remained turned inward, facing away, and that's okay. The moon shows her one face and it is enough, not because she has nothing more, but because that's the face that steadies the earth. That's the face that carries the memory of every look we've ever sent upward. That's the face that holds the footprints of astronauts, the scars of meteors, the silence of millennia. She is not a mystery to be solved. She is a companion to orbit with, and so you return to your bed beneath her glow, and you whisper not to the face she shows, but to the whole of her, I see what I can, I love what I know, and I honour what remains unseen. You drift now into a question so quiet, it's easy to miss it, but it waits in the margin, between glances, between breaths. A question not about science exactly, but about seeing, and about what it means to be seen. You float beside the moon again, silent and slow, as she turns through her eternal loop. The face she offers never shifts, and yet, somehow, each time you look, it feels new. Why? What does it mean to observe something? And more curiously, does being observed change the thing itself? You drift now into the mystery of quantum physics, not to dissect it, just to feel the shimmer of its strangeness. There's a famous experiment, the double-slit experiment. You may have heard of it. A single particle, say, an electron, is fired toward a barrier with two thin openings. If you don't watch, the electron behaves like a wave, passing through both slits at once, interfering with itself. But if you observe it, just the act of looking, it changes. It behaves like a particle, goes through one slit only, no interference. Your gaze collapses its possibility. Just by watching, you make it choose. It is as if the universe knows when it is being looked at, and that knowing changes the outcome. You drift now above the experiment, not as scientist, not as student, just as a curious presence, and you wonder, could that same phenomenon exist not just on the microscopic scale, but in the grand, gentle sweep of the cosmos? Does your gaze matter when it falls upon the moon, not physically, not gravitationally, but relationally, emotionally? You float now through the feeling of being seen, not spied, not watched, seen, truly. Remember that moment when someone looked at you and you felt real, not for how you looked or what you said, but just for being. That gaze changed you, didn't it? You softened, you straightened. You became more yourself, as if being seen called you into fuller form. Could it be that when we look at the moon, we do the same to her, that our attention gives her shape not in matter, but in meaning? You drift now into ancient times. People have always looked up, and they didn't just see a rock. They saw a goddess, a hunter, a rabbit, a wheel of life, a mirror, a secret. They saw symbols, dreams, warnings, comfort. The moon became what we needed her to be. Not because she changed, but because we looked. Observation isn't just science, it's story. And the moon has absorbed more stories than any other object in the sky. not with awareness, but with presence, and that you realize might be enough. Because even if she doesn't know she's being watched, she allows it. She turns her same face to us again and again. She lets us project, imagine, feel. She accepts our gaze. And in that acceptance, something changes. Not the moon, us. We soften. We pause. We remember that we are small, but not alone. You pass now through an observatory, a telescope trained on the moon, a scientist adjusting dials. They aren't watching for answers. They're watching because they can't not look. The moon is a constant in the sky, and yet she shifts every night. And in those shifts, we find a rhythm to match our own. You float now into the idea that the observer and the observed are never separate, that by seeing, you enter the story. You're not outside it. You are part of it. Just as the moon pulls the tides, you pull the moon into your experience. You make her a character, a confidant, a compass. And maybe that's a kind of sacred contract. You look, she glows. You wonder, she waits. You cry, she does not change. But somehow, she holds space for your feeling. That's what observation becomes when it's quiet, when it's human. A kind of witnessing that honours what it cannot touch. You drift back down now, to earth, to your body, to your breath. And as you lie there, eyes open or closed, you sense her above you, not watching, but being, steady, present, offered. And your gaze, this soft, lunar attention changes everything. Not the moon, but your own orbit. Because you're no longer alone in your looking. You drift now into the long quiet stare. Not your own. Not yet. This one began centuries ago. A man with a telescope crude by today's standards, yet revolutionary for its time, aimed his gaze toward the moon. His name was Galileo Galilei, and in 1609 he did something that changed how we see forever. He looked up and saw detail, craters, shadows, mountains. The moon, once thought to be a perfect sphere, divine and smooth, was scarred, flawed, Earth-like. You float beside him now, his breath fogging the cold lens, his heartbeat rising as he sketches what no human eyes had seen so clearly. He wasn't disappointed. He was astonished, because flaws meant reality, and reality meant connection. It meant the moon wasn't other, it was kin. You drift forward now, past Galileo, into generations of stargazers, each with slightly better tools, sharper lenses, clearer skies. But the impulse was the same to know her, to close the distance, even just a little. You hover now beside a modern observatory, vast, silent. Its dome opens like a blooming petal, and the telescope lifts its gaze, not with hunger, with reverence. You feel it. How even now, with high-definition images, digital sensors, robotic precision, the act of watching the moon still feels tender, almost intimate, like sitting across from someone you've known all your life and suddenly noticing something you've never seen before. The lens doesn't remove mystery, it sharpens it, because the closer you get, the more there is to see. Craters inside craters, tiny rills like dry riverbeds. Dust so fine it behaves like smoke. You pass through lunar regolith, a landscape built from time. Each granule formed by billions of years of meteor impacts. No wind, no water, just silence and sunlight and watching. You pause beside one of these telescopes, and you think, aren't we doing the same, accumulating small collisions? Moments, years, and still we allow others to look. We offer a face, not perfect, but present. The moon has always done this, and the telescope, in all its clever design, has never reduced her mystery. It has only made the mystery more detailed. You drift now into the act of looking itself. To aim a telescope at the moon is not an act of conquest. It's an act of wonder. And wonder is never about owning. It's about offering. You pass by a child on a rooftop with a telescope no taller than their knee. They lean in, adjusting, squinting, eyes wide. They are not seeking data, they are seeking awe. And awe, you realize, is the beginning of relationship. You felt it too that moment when the moon first reveals something you hadn't noticed before. A ridge. A rim. The subtle line where night creeps across her face called the terminator. That shadowed boundary between light and dark. It moves as she waxes and wanes, revealing just a little more each night, or taking a little back. And in that motion, you sense a rhythm, a slow reveal, a kind of trust. You think now of people again, how we, too, reveal ourselves in phases, never all at once, never all the time, and how looking closely, through love or lens, is not about discovery, it's about permission. The moon has always permitted our gaze, not because she needs us, but because she allows us. That allowance is a kind of generosity, and so every telescope from Galileo's to yours is an offering in return, not just of attention, but of presence. You look, you stay. You watch the same object again and again, knowing it will not wave back, but loving it anyway. That's the essence of tenderness, to sit with what is distant and still offer care, to know that something cannot respond and still believe that watching matters. You float now back to your own body, resting in your room, eyes soft, the window open just enough to let her light spill in. You don't need a telescope tonight. You only need stillness, because even without magnification, the moon is close. Close not in space, but in feeling. She has always been just far enough to make you reach, and just near enough to make the reaching worth it. So tonight, you let her light find you. You gaze gently, not to learn, not to measure, just to be with, just to see, just to allow the silence between moon and eye to mean something. And it does. It always has. You drift now across time, not as a traveller, but as a listener. The sky above has not changed, and yet the meanings drawn into it have been countless, especially the moon. She's more than a rock in orbit. To those who've looked up at her for millennia, she's a canvas, a character, a keeper of stories. You float gently over the face of the moon and you notice what others have seen before. Patterns, faint markings, dark planes, the vague suggestion of a face or a figure, and like soft ink on stone. These features have been read in 1,000 different ways. In China, they say a jade rabbit lives on the moon, pounding the elixir of life with a mortar and pestle. He's quiet, faithful, always working under her pale glow. In Native American stories, some see a grandmother wise, watching, guiding the cycles of growth and sleep. She rises to remind the earth of patience. In Europe, there's a man in the moon, doomed to carry a burden or observe humanity from his lonely place in the sky. Some say he was exiled. Others say he's there to witness. In the Pacific Islands, legends speak of lovers, of animals, of gods who turned their faces upward and never came back down. And in many parts of the world, the moon is a woman, a sister, a goddess, Diana, Selene, Hecate, Isis. each name an echo of reverence, each myth a mirror of longing. You drift among these tales now, not to rank them, not to decode, but to feel the shape they form together, a constellation of meanings. You begin to understand people don't just gaze at the moon, they see themselves in her. She becomes what we need her to be, lonely, all-seeing, comforting, unreachable, faithful. She takes our metaphors and wears them without complaint. She holds our fears, our dreams, our memories, because stories, like moonlight, do not need to be factual to be true. You drift now into a firelit circle. Long ago, a child asks, "What is the moon?" And an elder begins, not with equations, but with wonder, with language that glows. And you see how storytelling is another form of orbit, the way knowledge passes from one generation to the next, always circling, never ending. You drift into poems now, verses scribbled under lamplight, lines murmured on balconies, words like moonlight bathes, the pale moon weeps, silver witness. The moon appears more in poetry than almost anything else in the sky. She is constant, but never boring. She's silent, but never absent. She listens, and in that listening, she becomes part of the telling. You float past paintings, where the moon hovers over ships, fields, rivers, past lullabies, where mothers sing her into the dreams of children, past calendars, rituals, festivals. She marks time, new moon, waxing, full, waning, each phase a chapter, each return a reassurance. No matter what else changes, she will come back. That too is a story. You drift now toward memory, your own. When was the first time you noticed the moon, not just saw her, but felt her? Maybe it was a night walk, or a trip to the countryside, or a power outage when the world went dark and there she was glowing quietly above the stillness. That moment became a private myth, a story only your body knows, where the moon wasn't just a fact, she was a companion, a presence that made the night feel less alone. And now, even tonight, you feel it again. Not nostalgia, but remembering. The moon has always been just where you needed her, above, and somehow within. So you let the myths float around you now, like beads on a thread, like petals on water. You don't need to believe them, but you can hold them, because each one is a form of reaching, of making sense, of saying we looked up and something inside us answered back. And maybe that's the oldest story of all, the one where you gaze skyward and something, without speaking, says I'm here. You drift now into the murky place between science and story, where the moon's pull becomes less gravitational and more psychological. The space where facts blur slightly at the edges, and all that's left is wonder, and maybe a little fear. You've heard the word before, lunacy, a madness born beneath the moon. It's no coincidence that lunar lives in that word in lunar, in lunatic, in all the ways we've tied emotional turbulence to the silver disk in the sky. You drift backward through time, into a world before electricity, when nights were darker and the moon's brightness was a thing of drama. A full moon could flood a village with light, turn shadows into shapes, stir the mind into something more awake. People believed it, that full moons woke the wolves in men, that something ancient crept out during those nights. Werewolves. Moon-induced madness, a fraying of the veil between reason and instinct. And though science has often dismissed the connection, the stories persist. Hospital staff differently on full moons, Emergency rooms grow louder, police reports swell, coincidence or lunar rhythm. You float now through the body, the pineal gland, the circadian rhythm, the slow, patient ticking of sleep and wake. Studies have shown that even in windowless rooms, even when participants couldn't see the moon, their sleep changed during its fullness. REM sleep reduced, deep sleep delayed, as if the body knew the moon was watching, as if the moon's glow slipped under the door and touched the dreaming mind without light. You drift through dreams, now their odd colours, their unexpected doorways. So many people report vivid dreams near the full moon, even nightmares, even insights. And while the science is not definitive, the pattern lingers. You remember one, don't you? A dream that felt real, moonlit, emotional in ways that waking could not explain. You woke up wondering if it meant something. Maybe it did. Maybe it was your mind dancing in lunar rhythm. You move into the cycles of the body, the monthly rhythms that echo the moon. Menstruation and the moon have long been linked. Both follow 28-day cycles. Both wax and wane. In ancient cultures, people marked fertility by the moon's phases, ovulation during the full moon, bleeding with the new. Even now, some women report syncing with lunar time when disconnected from artificial light. Science debates the link. Some say the correlation is fading, others say it was never real, but the body is not always bound to what can be proven. You float into the idea that rhythms can be remembered without knowing, that bodies, like tides, respond to something older than evidence. You pass now through the hippocampus, the brain's memory keeper. It, too, pulses slightly differently under lunar phases. No one knows why. But some researchers believe that our ancestors' survival depended on moonlight. A full moon meant visibility. Predators could be seen. Movement was safer, or more dangerous. The mind adapted, learned to stay alert on brighter nights, and perhaps that echo still lingers. You drift above Earth now, billions of people sleeping, a full moon rising over cities and fields, oceans and deserts, each person carrying a different reaction, some restless, some serene, some dreaming more vividly than ever, and in all of them, something deep and unseen responds to the glow. You hover beside the moon and ask, softly, "Do you know what you do to us?" She does not answer. She only shines, not to disturb, not to manipulate, just to be. And that being is enough to stir the sea, shift the mind, and carry dreams across the night. So tonight, if your sleep feels strange, or your thoughts feel tender, or your dreams feel deeper than usual, blame the moon if you must, but perhaps thank her too, for being the kind of presence that can shape silence into rhythm, that can turn madness into metaphor, and dreams into tides. You drift downward now, not through sky, but through silence, a hush that thickens the closer you get, not heavy, but absolute. There is no air here, no breeze, no birdsong or distant hum of life, only the sound of your own breath and the soft rhythm of wonder. You're landing on the moon, not metaphorically, not in story, but in memory, in the footprints still pressed into the soil, in the dust that never forgets. You feel the first soft kiss of the surface, dry, loose, like ash sifted through ancient fingers. It gives beneath you, but not much, just enough. This is regolith, the blanket of moon dust that covers her crust, fine as flour, sharp-edged, electrostatically clingy. There is a rain to smooth it, no wind to blow it away. It is formed by billions of years of tiny meteorite impacts crushing rock into powder, each grain a history, each layer a record. You take a step, and your boot leaves a print that may last 1,000,000 years, because nothing here washes anything clean. The moon keeps every mark. You think of Neil Armstrong now, Buzz Aldrin, the first humans to set foot here. It was 1969, the Sea of Tranquility. They weren't greeted by flags or signs, only stillness and dust. They spoke softly, as if not to wake something ancient, and when they left, they carried part of the moon with them. Literally, the dust clung to their suits, to their boots. It smelled metallic, like spent gunpowder, but it wasn't smoke, it was memory. They couldn't shake it off. Back in the lunar module, they brushed at it, but it clung to everything. Clung to skin, to nostrils, to history. It was abrasive, alive in its own silent way, because moon dust doesn't forget. You drift now across the landing site. The flag still stands, faded, motionless. There is no breeze to move it, only the ghost of movement from when it was placed. You glide past the lunar module descent stage, still sitting where it was left, and beside it, footprints, perfect, unchanged, like echoes frozen in time. The moon is a vault. She keeps what we give her. She does not rot. She does not rust. Even the astronauts' bags of waste, left behind on later missions, remain undisturbed, not out of reverence, but because here, nothing moves unless moved. You hover now above the tire tracks from the lunar rover. They loop and cross like scribbles from a child's hand on an infinite canvas, and you wonder, what does it mean to leave a mark on a world that cannot erase it? You feel both power and humility, because the moon didn't ask to be stepped on, and yet she received it. Just as she receives your gaze now, without resistance, without defense, you drift through the samples, collected rocks carried home, analyzed for weeks, stored in vaults. Their chemistry told stories of volcanoes that no longer roar, of impacts that reshaped her skin, of isotopes and silence and age. The oldest moon rocks are 4.5 billion years old, older than any story we've ever written, older than bones, older than air. You feel that age now, not as weight but as stillness. The moon isn't in a hurry. She isn't waiting for meaning. She simply holds. You pass through the memory of a glove, brushing against a boulder, the camera catching it all, and you think we touched her, not out of conquest, but out of longing, out of a need to say we came, we saw, we remember. And she, without word, without light of her own, said back, I will hold what you leave behind. You float now into your own body. How many places have you been? How many memories have you stepped through without leaving a mark? But here, on the moon, every impression remains. You begin to wonder what kind of dust you've carried back with you. From places, from people, from moments that clung to your skin. Invisible, but real. Every goodbye, every silence, like moon dust caught in the seams of your soul. And maybe that's not a burden. Maybe that's a blessing, because what clings reminds you that you were there. You lived. You stepped forward. You looked up and then out, and the universe, or at least the moon, noticed. You hover once more above her silver surface, still pockmarked, still steady. And you know we left footprints on the moon, but long before that, she left them on us. You sit now in the quietest place you've ever known. Not metaphorical quiet, not the hush of a library or the stillness of dawn. This is a silence that goes deeper, beyond sound. Beyond expectation, you're sitting on the moon's surface, and it does not hum, it does not sing, it does not breathe. There is no wind to whistle, no leaves to rustle, no waves to crash. Even your own breath feels like an intrusion. This is a world without air, without atmosphere, without the ingredients that carry sound. You try to listen, but nothing answers. And yet it doesn't feel empty. It feels aware. You sit, still as stone, and the silence presses gently around you like velvet. It is not a wall, it is a presence. And in it, you feel something unexpected. You feel listened to. It's not logical. You know the moon has no ears, no mind, no curiosity, and yet something in her silence feels like space being held, not passively, but generously. You drift through the history of noise, of earth that loud, breathe in place. There, even silence is full of life. Frogs croaking, engines turning, your own heartbeat pulsing in your ears. But here even your heartbeat is swallowed by the vacuum. You float above the idea of sound, a pressure wave, a vibration in molecules. On Earth, you are surrounded by them, in air, in water, even through the ground. But on the moon, no molecules to carry the wave, only rock, only dust, only stillness. And yet, when seismometers were left behind by Apollo missions, they registered movement, not sound, but moonquakes, tiny tremors, shifts in temperature, echoes of past impacts. Some scientists say the moon rings like a bell when struck, not aloud, not in human terms, but in vibration, in persistence. You float through this idea that even in silence, the moon speaks, not in volume, but in patience, not in words, but in duration. She outlasts every story, every empire, every sound, and that, perhaps, is a kind of language. You drift now into your own memory of silence, a time when someone simply sat with you. No advice, no solution. Just presence. It healed more than words ever could. That's what the moon does. She sits, always just above, just far enough to be unreachable, just close enough to be seen. And in her silence, she makes room. Room for your grief, your joy, your questions, your dreams. She holds all of them without interruption. You float now back to the lunar surface. Imagine you could lie there, your body weightless in that soft, dry dust. The sky above pure black, even at midday, because there is no atmosphere to scatter sunlight into blue. Just the sun blazing in silence, just the earth, small and blue, hovering above the horizon, and you, not speaking, not needing to. Because here, you remember something your body always knew. Listening doesn't require ears, and being heard doesn't require words. Sometimes, what you need most is a space vast enough to echo your presence back to you, not with sound, but with stillness. You drift into the feeling of being received, of being allowed. The moon does not judge your noise, she does not demand your silence. She simply offers hers, always, forever. You think now of your own moments of quiet, the ones you fill with music, with distraction, with scrolling. But tonight, you let it settle. This vast lunar hush where everything you are can rest. No one interrupts, no one corrects. Even the stars hold their breath. And the moon, the old, watching moon, listens without question, without advice, without reply, and somehow that is enough. You float now over a surface that does not forget, a place where time does not erode and memory is not rewritten, but carved bold, permanent, raw. You're gliding over the craters of the moon, each one a moment, a collision, a punctuation mark in the long, unspoken sentence of her existence. They are everywhere, some small as a coin, some vast as seas. Some shallow, like footprints, others deep, like echoes, all of them still here, because on the moon there is no weather, no wind to sweep the dust, no rain to wash the stone, no growth, no erosion. What strikes the surface stays. You hover now above Tycho crater, bold and brilliant near the moon's south, 85 kilometers wide, formed 100 million years ago. Its rays, bright streaks of ejected material, fan out across the lunar face like sunbursts frozen in ash. From Earth, you may have seen it, even without knowing its name, a white splash, bright even in a full moon, and now you know it is a scar, but a beautiful one. You drift toward Copernicus crater, dignified and circular. Its walls rise like quiet sentinels, and at the centre a cluster of peaks stands where impact melted stone has threw it back into stillness. These craters are not random, they are records. Geologists read them like historians read ruins. The bigger the crater, the older the story. You float above them and feel the weight of ages not heavy, but wide. The moon's surface is a palimpsest of trauma and resilience. Nothing heals, but nothing fades. You think now of Earth, how we forget, how water washes away the past, how forests reclaim battlefields, how cities crumble and disappear beneath vines. Earth forgives, the moon remembers, and sometimes you need both. You drift into the story of an impact. A rock from space, hurtling fast, strikes the surface. Energy explodes outward. Stone vaporizes, dust rises, then settles again. The crater forms in seconds, but remains for eternity. There are ghost craters, too buried beneath lava plains, their rims barely visible. Even here, the moon has layered memory, not erased, just covered. You pass over the South Pole Aitken Basin, one of the largest known impact basins in the solar system, over 2,500 kilometers across. So ancient, it's older than any earthly mountain. It may have punched through the moon's crust and exposed its inner layers, a scar so deep it became revelation. You pause and wonder. What are the craters in you that exposed your own depths? Moments of impact, of rupture, of unexpected arrivals that change the shape of your surface. Are they gone, or are they still there, quietly catching moonlight when you think no one's looking? You drift back across the moon's face. It is not ruined, it is recorded, and somehow, in the sharpness of each rim, in the stillness of each basin, there is grace, because the moon does not grieve its scars. She displays them openly, without apology, and still she shines. You think now of a time when someone saw your scars emotional, physical, invisible, and did not look away. Maybe they asked no questions. Maybe they simply stayed. And in that staying, you felt more whole. That's what the moon offers. Not erasure, not healing, but space for what is permanent, and in that space, a kind of peace. You pass again over those same craters. They do not change, but you do. Because now you see them not as damage, but as testament to survival, to history, to the quiet courage of being unchanged in a world that always asks you to soften your edges, The moon keeps her edges, and still we love her, because her surface, marked as it is not frightening, it's familiar. It reminds us that we too can hold beauty and ruin in the same body, that we too can reflect light with a face that's been shaped by everything we've endured. So tonight, when you look up, don't just see glow, see story, see memory, frozen in dust, offered without shame. And remember, every crater is a moment, and every moment is part of the whole. You rise now through darkness, the kind of darkness that only space can hold, but something soft is glowing ahead. Not the moon as you've known her, bold and bright, round and sharp against the night, but dim, delicate, as if she were lit from within. Only she isn't. She's being lit by us. You are witnessing Earthshine, the soft, bluish glow that appears on the moon's shadowed side when she is just a sliver in the sky. A crescent hangs in the night, and yet the rest of her disk is still visible, faintly illuminated. It is not the sun that does this. It is the earth. Light from the sun strikes our oceans, our clouds, our snowy mountain tops, and reflects outward, upward toward the moon. The moon, in turn, reflects that light back to us, a reflection of a reflection, a whisper of presence folded into another. You hover between them now, earth and moon, and feel how light travels not as possession, but as a gift. The earth glows when the moon is dim, and the moon, so often the giver of light, now receives. It's a moment of humility, of grace. She doesn't need to shine every night. She allows herself to be held. You drift along the curve of the earth now, noticing how our atmosphere, our oceans, make us a bright object in the sky. To the moon, we are dazzling, far brighter than she appears to us. In fact, the earth reflects more than 3 times as much light as the moon does. To stand on the moon during an earthlit night would be like basking beneath a pale, shifting lantern. Clouds would swirl across its face. Continents would move slowly by. Storms would bloom. Oceans would sparkle. The earth would be full of colour and life, a breathing jewel in a black sea. You begin to understand how the moon must feel, not as a metaphor but as experience. To look up and see the world glowing, to receive light you cannot generate, to be illuminated by another. You drift into the realm of relationships, how we so often shine because others have shown us how. You've known people like that. People who glowed with their own warmth and who, without realizing it, lit you up in return. You weren't copying, you were reflecting, and somehow, in that reflection, you became brighter too. You drifted now into moments when you were the earth, the source, and someone else, in their quiet phase, reflected what you gave. Maybe a friend in the midst of grief, maybe a stranger who smiled just because you did. You weren't trying to be the sun, you were just present, and your presence was light enough. That's what Earthshine reminds you, that even when you feel small, or far away, or unseen, you may be lighting someone else without ever knowing. You hover again beside the moon. Her face is mostly dark tonight. Only a slender crescent glows with solar brilliance. But look closely. The rest of her is waiting, and there in the shadow Earthshine fills in the silence. It doesn't demand. It doesn't compete. It complements. It honours the dark by offering gentleness. You think now of your own shadowed places, parts of yourself that don't shine as easily, moments when you felt dim, distant, dull. But even then, You were not in darkness. Something or someone was sending you light. Maybe a song, maybe a memory. Maybe the way the moon looked on a night when you felt small. That's Earthshine too. Soft reminders that even when you feel less, you're still seen, still part of the orbit, still touched by glow. You drift again toward the moon's surface. Earthshine glimmers faintly across the craters. The shadows are not gone, but they're gentled. You think of how often we try to banish the dark as if light is only valid when it is blinding. But Earthshine says otherwise. It says let the dark remain, let the silence breathe, and offer just enough glow for someone to feel their way forward. Not all illumination needs to be bright. Some of it needs only to be present. So tonight, you lie in your bed, the window cracked just slightly, and you look for that faint shimmer on the edge of the moon. And maybe, in doing so, you remember this. Even your quietest moments may be casting Earthshine on someone else's shadows. Even your dimmest glow may be the light someone is waiting to receive. You drift now through the gentle space between looking and being, between watching and what it means to be seen. Tonight, your eyes are still turned upward. The moon waits in her usual place, quiet as always, unmoving in her arc. But something inside you stirs with a strange question, not of astronomy, but of perception. Could your gaze change her, not physically, not in mass or motion, but in something subtler, in presence, in participation? The idea feels impossible, and yet you drift now into a field where such impossibilities are taken seriously. Quantum mechanics. You glide down to a scale smaller than atoms. Smaller than electronicity, smaller than comprehension. Particles blink in and out of certainty here. They behave as both waves and dots. They flicker in probability until we look, and when we look they change. The classic double-slit experiment repeats itself, a particle unobserved. Travels like a wave, taking all paths, being in all places at once, but the moment you place a detector, a watchful eye that potential collapses, the wave becomes a particle. The possibilities vanish. Only one outcome remains. Just by watching, we change what is real. You drift through this paradox slowly, carefully, because it feels like magic, but it's not. It's physics. You pass the idea of entanglement next when two particles become linked so completely that the state of one determines the other, instantly, no matter the distance. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. He didn't like it, but it keeps proving true. And now you wonder, could something so strange, so intimate, exist between us and the moon? Not in measurement, but in meaning. Could your gaze, soft, unfocused, entangle you with that orbiting stone? Does your attention matter? You drift back from the quantum realm into the macro world. Things are more stable here. Planets orbit, apples fall, light travels, but still you carry the seed of that strange truth. That observation changes the observed, not just in science, in life. You've felt it. How a room shifts when someone walks in. How a child stands taller when watched with love. How your own voice wavers when you think no one is listening, then steadies when a friend looks into your eyes. Observation is not neutral. It carries presence. It carries weight. And maybe, just maybe, your gaze reaches further than you think. You imagine a thread of quiet attention stretching from your eyes all the way to the moon's grey face. You can't measure it, but you feel it. as if, by watching her, you draw her just a little closer, not in space, but in soul. You remember now a night you stood outside, overwhelmed. Words didn't help, people didn't know, and then you looked up, and she was there. You didn't pray, you didn't ask, you simply looked, and the looking was enough. That moment, that connection stayed with you. And now, you understand in your quietest moments, the moon becomes your witness. Not because she's aware, but because you are. And your awareness wraps around her like gravity. You are the observer. And in quantum physics, observers are not separate from systems. They are part of them. You and the moon and the space between entangled, just enough to feel the hush of belonging. So tonight, you lie back, you let your breath slow, and you look again, not to measure, not to understand, just to be with. And in that gaze, however soft, you shape something. Maybe not her craters, or her orbit, or her glow, but her meaning, her moment, and that is more than enough. You drift now toward the moment when the moon vanishes, not forever, just for a breath, a pause in light, a curtain of shadow, a perfect, temporary silence drawn across the sky. You're entering the space of eclipse, not metaphor yet, but event. It begins slowly, a soft bite taken from the moon's edge, then more, until the curve of her face melts into darkness. A lunar eclipse. Earth passes between sun and moon, and our shadow stretches wide across her ancient skin. We block the light. We, the ones who usually receive. We, the watchers. Now, the obstacle. You hover above Earth as this happens. Our planet, suspended in light, casting a long silhouette onto the moon. And the moon silent, ever steady, accepts it. She doesn't resist. She fades into a rusty red glow. Blood moon, some call it, but there's no violence here, only geometry, only shadow, only the Earth's atmosphere bending light, scattering blue and letting through the deep oranges and reds of sunset and sunrise from every horizon at once. So as the moon darkens, she is not extinguished. She is touched by the light of all the Earth's edges. That's the mystery. She disappears, and yet glows with a light more intimate than ever before. You drift closer. You feel how strange it is to see the moon like this, not shining, but revealed. Because sometimes the most beautiful moments come not from what is added, but what is taken away. Not presence, but absence. Not fullness, but pause. You remember now a time in your life when something left. A person, a certainty, a dream. And for a while, everything felt darker. But in that dark, new colours emerged. Deeper ones. Ones you couldn't see when everything was bright. That, too, was an eclipse. You drift now into a solar eclipse. This time, the moon moves between Earth and Sun, a smaller shadow, but more complete, in rare alignment. The moon exactly covers the sun. The sky dims in midday. Birds fall silent. The air cools. You're left with a glowing ring, a corona. The sun's fiery outer layer made visible only when its center is hidden. Scientists rush to observe. Photographers hold their breath. But no photo can hold the feeling. It's not just spectacle. It's transformation. A reminder that things you think are always there, the sun, for instance, can disappear, if only for a moment. And in their absence, you feel their presence more fully than ever. That's what eclipses teach, that sometimes you must lose the light to see what surrounds it. You drift now through myths again. Ancient cultures feared eclipses, a dragon swallowing the sun, a god turning his face away, a warning, but others saw it as a moment of reverence, a bowing, a reminder, a breath held between beats. You think of how people still gather to watch eclipses now. They travel for hours, they stand quietly in fields, they put down their phones for once and just look, because it's rare, because it doesn't last, because it makes you feel the thinness between certainty and awe. You float again above the moon. She is returning now. The Earth's shadow slips away. Light returns, first as a shimmer, then a crescent, then her full face. But you know she's changed, not in substance, but in meaning, because now you've seen what happens when the constant becomes the hidden, and you understand the moon doesn't always shine, but when she steps into shadow she doesn't vanish. She glows differently. She carries the sun in new colours. You think of yourself again, how you, too, have been eclipsed by doubt, by sorrow, by silence, and how, in those times, you were not empty. You were glowing with light refracted through your edges. Others saw it, even when you didn't, just like we see the moon most vividly when the earth tries to block her. So tonight, if you feel dim, or paused, or unseen, remember, these eclipses are not endings. They are recalibrations of light, moments that teach you the brilliance of return, and the moon, who's passed through so many, never stops showing up, neither should you. You drift now above the moon, but not alone. There are others here, not people, not animals, but objects, sentinels, messengers, love letters made of metal and code, still circling, still whispering. You float through lunar orbit, a space not empty, but full of human hope. Instruments glide silently along invisible paths, their bodies cold, their purpose clear. Some were launched decades ago, some are new. Each one carries a piece of us, a question, a camera, a sensor, a desire. You drift beside Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter sent by NASA in 2009. It maps the surface in exquisite detail, revealing craters, slopes, even footprints left by Apollo astronauts. Every day, it sends images home, more than 1 million so far, not to invade, not to claim, but to understand, to witness. Its camera eyes never close. You pass Chandrayaan-2 from India, which sought to explore the southern pole, searching for frozen water in the moon-shadowed craters, those dark hollows where sunlight never reaches, where ice may have waited for billions of years. A different kind of treasure, not gold, not gems, but water, the foundation of life, found, perhaps, on a lifeless world. You glide by China's Chang'e orbiters, named for the moon goddess herself. They've mapped, they've landed, they've returned samples, as if the story came full circle, myth becoming mission. You feel it now, the thread of longing in each spacecraft. They were not sent just to study, they were sent to connect. You think of a love letter, carefully written, launched with hope, maybe never answered, but meaningful all the same. That's what these missions are. Letters to the moon, whispers into orbit, satellites carrying our questions without needing replies. You drift lower, toward the surface. There, too, we've left things, not just footprints and flags, but mirrors, seismometers, defunct rovers, still sitting where they were last parked, and further down, buried in the dust, personal artifacts, a family photo, a tiny sculpture, a patch from a uniform, A feather and a hammer drop together to show that in the absence of air, they fall at the same speed. Science, yes, but also story. You hover above the Apollo 11 landing site, still, unchanged. The flag may be bleached by sunlight, the equipment may no longer function, but the story remains, a step taken, a voice speaking softly. A world listening, you imagine the moon hearing those words not literally but symbolically, as if every message sent into her orbit is heard in its own way, not decoded, but held. You think of your own life, of the messages you've sent without answers, the texts not replied to, the gestures unnoticed, the truths spoken only once. Maybe they weren't lost. Maybe they're orbiting, still circling, still present, still waiting for a soft landing, like satellites, like whispers. You return to the spacecraft above. Some are still working, some are silent now, their batteries dead, their signal gone, and yet they are still there, not forgotten, because the act of sending was never wasted. You feel it. The moon did not ask to be studied. She did not request company. But we reached anyway. We extended our hands in machines and sensors and dreams, and she, without approval or rejection, accepted them. She made space. And perhaps that is the greatest kindness of all. You float one last time through her orbit among these quiet companions, each one a love letter still moving, still speaking in its own silent language, a language the moon never answers, but always receives. You drift now into the future, though it feels curiously familiar. Above you, the moon glows not the old, quiet companion you know, but something else, brighter, stranger, suspended in orbit by human hands. You are passing into a realm of speculation, where engineers and dreamers have begun to ask, what if we built our own moon, not to replace the one we have, but to imitate it, to light our cities, to shape our nights, to recreate awe with circuitry. You drift past designed satellites shaped like discs, angled to reflect sunlight onto dark places below. In 2018, China announced a plan to launch an artificial moon, a satellite to glow over Chengdu, replacing streetlights with orbiting brightness. They called it a moonlight satellite, and though it hasn't launched, the idea caught attention. Wonder, worry. Could we light the sky by our own design? Could we make night a little less night? You float beside the concept not to judge, but to feel it. There is something beautiful in the wish to bring light to places in shadow, and yet there is something missing too, because the real moon is not just a lamp. She is not efficient, not engineered. She waxes, she wanes, she hides behind clouds, she rises late, or early, or not at all. She is unpredictable, imperfect, and that's what makes her meaningful. A man-made moon might shine brighter, but it wouldn't shimmer. It wouldn't carry the weight of myth, the hush of tides, the shape of memory. It wouldn't feel like a witness. You drift through simulated skies, LED ceilings in underground stations, digital moons in theme parks, nightlights shaped like crescents in nursery rooms. We recreate what soothes us. We copy what comforts. But the imitation never quite replaces the original. Because the real moon doesn't just glow. She moves. She returns. She surprises. And more than that, she waits. Your heart knows the difference between true presence and repetition, between a recording of a voice and a voice in the room. The moon is real, and real things don't always show up on demand. They arrive when they arrive. You think now of your own need for light. How often have you reached for your phone in the dark? How often have you filled silence with the noise? You're not wrong to want comfort. We all do. But the moon teaches patience. She teaches you that sometimes it's okay to sit in darkness and trust that light is returning. You drift now through a city flooded with artificial light, street lamps, billboards, neon signs. The stars have retreated. The moon, too, is harder to find. You wonder what we lose when we make everything bright. We lose shadow. We lose depth. And sometimes we lose the pause that lets us see clearly. An artificial moon might remove the night, but it cannot replace what night has taught us. That rest is sacred. That reflection comes in stillness. That beauty is not always bright. You return to your place beneath the sky, the real one. You look up. Maybe tonight the moon is hidden. Maybe she's waning. Maybe she hasn't risen yet. But still, you wait. And in that waiting, you feel something stir. Not impatience, not hunger, but reverence. Because she is not yours to summon. She is not built. She is born. And when she comes not as a solution, but as a presence. So let others build their imitation skies. Let satellites shine where darkness used to be, but let the moon remain unowned. Let her remain mysterious, because in her ancient light, you are reminded that not everything worth seeing can be made. Some things must simply be noticed and loved exactly as they are. You drift now into a quieter time, but not the kind of quiet that soothes. This one feels empty. The streets are still busy. Screens glow in every hand. Voices murmur behind closed doors. But overhead, no one looks. You hover above the rooftops, and you see a world that has forgotten the sky. Not because it's gone, not because it changed, but because it faded behind other things. Notifications, deadlines, headlines, lights. The moon is still there, faithful, steady, but fewer eyes find her. She rises, as always, waxing and waning, casting her familiar glow onto sidewalks, bedrooms, quiet forests. But the glances are fewer, the awe rare. And you wonder, what happens to the moon when no one watches her? Does she still shine with the same softness? Does her silence feel different without witness? You float through classrooms where no one studies the stars, through cities where light pollution hides her completely. A generation grows up thinking of the moon only as a background detail in cartoons, never stopping, never looking, never asking. You pass by a child nose down, device glowing. The moon is full tonight, but her glow does not compete with the screen, and yet you see something shift. A cloud parts. A glimmer touches the corner of the child's eye, and for 1 second, just one, they look up. Their mouth opens, not to speak, but to breathe, to feel. And in that second, the spell breaks. A thread reconnects. The moon is remembered. You drift now through memory itself. You think of your own first look upward. When did it happen? Was it intentional? Or did you stumble into wonder by accident? It doesn't matter. What matters is that it happened. And once it did, you were never the same. You carried her with you even when you weren't watching, because something in you had learned to remember. That's what the moon offers. Not just light, but a rhythm of return. She doesn't demand our gaze. She doesn't ask for attention. She simply shows up. And in doing so, she teaches us to show up too. You float above the earth now, watching people below. Some are still looking up. A hiker on a trail, alone with the stars, an elderly woman on a porch, wrapped in quiet, a nurse on her break, face turned skyward for just a moment. Not many, but enough. The thread is not broken, it is simply quiet. You begin to see something. The moon does not depend on being seen to be what she is, but we might. Because looking up is not just observation, it is connection. To the cosmos, to stillness, to wonder, to something older than language and larger than thought. You drift through a poet's attic. They've written a line about the moon. No one will read it, but they had to write it. You hover by a child drawing a lopsided circle in the corner of a page. They don't know why they chose the moon, but they did. You watch a tired worker walking home late. They sigh, they stretch, and for no reason at all, they glance up, and for a second, they feel lighter. The moon is seen, just briefly, but that is enough. You think now of the possibility that someday no one will look, that we'll build ceilings too tall, lights too bright, schedules too full. But even then she will rise, because the moon does not exist for us. She exists with us. And even if we forget her, she remembers. She remembers Earth with every crater. She remembers touch with every footprint. She remembers eyes that once searched her face for meaning. And in that remembering, she remains real. So tonight, if you're tired or distracted or caught in the tangle of noise, try just once to look up, not for long, not to learn, just to notice. Because when you do, something inside you quietly says there you are, and the moon, as always, says it back.